I would like to begin by expressing my deepest condolences to the entire Goldman family, and I want to extend a special greeting to Ralph's daughters, Naomi Goldman, who is with us this morning, and Judy Baumgold and her family, who are watching our session via stream in Jerusalem. It's hard to believe that 2 months have elapsed since that October 7th morning when we learned of our dear friend Ralph's passing. Just 5 weeks after he celebrated his 100th birthday. And the sad news was not unexpected, but still it came as a shock to those of us for whom Ralph Goldman and JDC have always been synonymous. Ralph was a towering, inspirational figure. His life and career were stuff of legend. His deeds form an integral part of contemporary Jewish history. Ralph's career was extraordinary, not only because of its longevity, but because it was marked by a breadth of vision and a long, stellar list of accomplishments. Israel, the Jewish people, and Jewish communities worldwide were the beneficiaries of those accomplishments and of Ralph's deep and unremitting devotion to their well-being. What makes our loss a bit easier to bear, I think, is the fact that we had an opportunity at our centennial gathering in Israel this past May to celebrate Ralph's life and to do so together with him and his extended family. That occasion was made doubly sweet by the fact that Ralph and the JDC were sharing this centennial milestone. Given the trajectory of Ralph's life and career, this juxtaposition seemed altogether fitting and appropriate. Let me conclude by paraphrasing what another rebuilder of Jewish life, Rabbi Adin Seinstald, said last month of his good friend Ralph. His main idea was helping people, especially our people, in whatever way it could be done. His main flaw was that there was only one of him. It is now my privilege to call on our dear devoted board member, Jerry Spitzer, a man who shares Ralph's passionate, lifelong commitment to JDC and has worked together with him on so many critical endeavors. Jerry.
Thank you, Penny. I decided to talk about how Ralph changed the joint. The joint probably changed Ralph, but I want to focus on how Ralph changed the joint. And for 37 years, I've been involved with the organization, 7 years as director of operations with Ralph, and after that as a friend, a confidant, and a lay leader. So what happened in these years? And I want to speak about it from the front row, because I was there. So in 1976, shortly after Ralph arrived in New York and looked at the JDC operations, he made a decision that we had to relook at this. And they commissioned a study called, at that time, Compassion in Action, a Continuing Task. And it was the first time JDC in 60 years looked at this. And we are no longer a tzedakah organization. We're a permanent organization. What should we be doing? And from that came out the structure we have today. There wasn't a board of the whole. There were area committees. There was education for lay leaders. There was partnerships between professional and lay. And that to today, when you look around, we probably have 20 subcommittees, and everybody has, and the silos are broken, and people know what's going on in the entire organization. So that was Ralph. I'm going to give you two other short ones. In 1980, the end of 1979, a catastrophe was occurring around the world. And most of you know about the killing fields, which started with a change of regime in Cambodia. Khmer Rouge came in, it was genocide. People were leaving the country if they can get out, and if they weren't killed, they tried to go into Thailand. Thailand put up a border because they didn't want them to get into Thailand, and a huge refugee camp was created called Khao Dang. It had 165,000 refugees at its height. And at that point, we decided to open a mailbox. It's the first time we did a mailbox. And the purpose of that was for the American Jewish community to act as a whole and carry a flag of what we're doing for non-Jewish issues, but as Jews. And so that was successful, but Ralph was already on the move after next. That was my move, but he was on the next move. And what was the next move? 3 days later, I was on a plane to Thailand. And the reason for it was we don't want to just send a check. We want to get involved. What could we do that was sustainable, that we had knowledge about, and let's do it in partnership, but not just send a check. And as a result of that, we developed a school system with 9,000 children. That's the real number. You go to the archives, there's newsprints about it, for grades 6 to 11. It was easier because after spending time, and I spent a couple of weeks there, we realized that part of the refugee group were teachers. And there were kids that lost the Khmer culture. And that school system lasted for more than 15 years. And what happened after that? IDP came into play. And that's how IDP became developed. You don't send checks anymore. You're there on the ground helping to do what we do best. And the last one is, I'll call it from central files to archives. When I was here, first we didn't have computers, we didn't have anything like that, but you always made a copy of every letter that went out. And Ralph was meticulous about it. We called it the yellows. And it all went to central files. And if you had an idea about something, you had a meeting with somebody, you did a memo for the file. And you sent it there too. That's just what you did. But Ralph saw something else. Ralph saw history. I saw files. And what happened today? JDC today, as a result of that vision, has the largest collection of letters, files, documents, film, and photographs about modern Jewish history any place in the world. And so when we did the book, it was hard because we had so much and what's key. And the last is on a personal level. Ralph changed my life. And consequently, my wife, Linda, our kids and grandkids, and even our 2 grandchildren actually were bar and bat mitzvahed in Europe, in addition to America. Because what did I learn? We're global people, and we're entwined and interrelated. And that changed it. And 2 things. Ralph was the ultimate Jewish leader who was an insider. He felt very comfortable in the background and not always in the foreground. And what it taught us is the art and the importance of giving. And that one of the joys of living is to give. And that's the story, and that's a lasting legacy, personally and institutionally. Thank you.
JDC was passionate about the Jewish people wherever they happen to be. And for that reason, I feel that even though I've worked for the Joint a few decades, I feel as if I've worked for the Joint all my life, because that's the purpose that has always motivated me. By the time I got here, well, Ben was delivering services for some 6 or 7 institutions for the aged. They started with 5,000 beds for the chronically ill. The only way we could do it is to establish a program together with the government of Israel, with the understanding that eventually the government would take over. Returning to Eastern Europe, was important for the Jewish community. We began our negotiations with Hungary, returned to Hungary on January 16, 1980. This was followed soon after by return to Poland. Here I was in Poland, all by myself. So I said, I'm here as an ambassador of the Jewish people, and I'm not here for political reasons. Here, this is a blank piece of paper. I'll sign here, and you'll sign here on this little pad. After all, everything depends on the goodwill of how we implement it. In order to have mission, you have to have continuity. And to have continuity, you have to work with young people. I enjoyed working with young people because they always come in with new ideas. I think the most important thing is still to find a common language in the broad sense, not just the Hebrew language, between the Jews of the world. We are a global organization, showing it to the rest of the world. We're all responsible for one another. Someplace along the line, I think we have to sit back and say, why are we, as an organization in existence, we're an organization to deal with the destiny of the Jewish people. I have been lucky, privileged, lucky, whichever way you want to look at it. There wasn't a task that I undertook that I did not enjoy, because I always felt I was not developing a career. I was not looking for a career. I was basically in the service of my people.
The last thing that Jerry said is the first thing I have written down, which is, before we even met, Ralph Goldman changed my life. And this photo here is a picture of Ralph and I from the first time we met. And it looks like we've known each other forever, but we had actually only met that morning. I was almost 30 years old. I was married. I had a great job, and I was living here in New York City. And my husband was encouraging me to follow a dream that Ralph Goldman was inspired by, to see the world, to meet fellow Jews, to understand where I came from, to feel connected, and to do good. To be awarded the Ralph Goldman Fellowship in International Jewish Service was a life-changing experience for me. And I'm honored to be here today I'm honored to be here today, and with many of the other former Ralph Goldman Fellows who are sitting right in the table back here. Will you guys just stand up for a minute, please? We're all here in celebration of Ralph, who is someone that meant so much to all of us. We're 30 fellows in the last 27 years since the inception of the fellowship. And we actually haven't all met together in many, many years, so we came together this morning for breakfast to pay our own private respects to Ralph. And I was really moved by all the stories that people shared, everything from eating sushi, going out on ice cream dates. Someone who's not here right now told a very funny story about interviewing Ralph while he was on his stationary bike the whole hour, and that was just 2 years ago. We all served in different places and at different times, but our memories of Ralph are something special that we all share. And this is a group of people who meant a lot to Ralph. During my time as a fellow, I served in Ukraine and Ethiopia, and I met with Ralph on trips to Israel and New York in between. And after the fellowship, we kept in touch over email, on the phone, on Facebook, and every time either one of us was either in New York or in Israel. I loved that time that we spent together because Ralph had a way of making you feel like you were the only person that mattered, like he had nowhere else to be than right there with you in that time. Other fellows were blessed to work with Ralph in the same office. There's another picture that Alexis shared on Facebook, and this is a picture of Ralph in his New York office, and I can't imagine what it would have been like to come to work every day and see him smiling like that. What I took away from my fellowship year was an understanding of my place in this world, how to be a better Jew and how to be a good person, how in Ralph's words, there is a single Jewish world intertwined and interconnected. Those words are emblematic of why Ralph's vision continues to inspire a next generation of Jewish leaders, and far beyond myself and the other fellows. When you think about it, it's actually quite unbelievable. The world we live in today is fundamentally different than it was even just 10 years ago. And the fact that a 100-year-old man's words could inspire JDC's Global Entwine movement is both extraordinary and humbling. As many of you know, I recently completed my second and my final term as co-chair of the National Entwine Steering Committee. And I was part of that original group that brainstormed what Entwine might be and what we would call ourselves. And back then, you just knew us as JDC Next Gen. And Entwine is actually a play on Ralph's words, ones that so clearly embody what JDC is about, but for a new next generation of young Jews. There is a single, intertwined, interconnected Jewish world. This is who I am. This is who the 30 Ralph Goldman Fellows are. This is who the 300 Jewish Service Corps volunteers are. And this is who the 12,000 local Entwine program participants are. It's what JDC Entwine is, and this is exactly who Ralph was to us. Ralph was only ever looking forward, even when he was sharing and talking about the past. He transcended a generational divide and will forever be remembered by Entwine as our inspiration, a mentor, and a guiding light, with his bow tie, of course. Each year, thousands of young Jews are living and breathing Ralph's values and vision, not only as a namesake or in words, but in our core values, in deeds of service and action and leadership around the world, in our dreams and aspirations for the next 100 years of a JDC that is meaningful and relevant to us. I am honored to carry Ralph's name with me and to be a part of the growing Entwine network that shares his legacy for Jewish people who are responsible for one another. I'm grateful to be here with you today to share what is truly our blessing in life, to have known and loved such a gentle and great man as Ralph Goldman. Thank you.
Been told to let everyone know that the film is available, will be available on the JDC website after the program. There are two places that play a major role in Jewish history. The first is Mount Sinai. According to a tradition, it's the place where a band of slaves became a people, a place where they received a text that became the foundation stone of Western tradition. The second place is Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, the city that the warrior poet King David made the capital of the Jewish people, a city that served as a pilgrimage site for centuries, the focus of the spiritual life of Jews throughout the generations. Sinai and Jerusalem, two places that played a major role in Jewish history. Today in our ritual life, only one of them plays a role. Twice a year we say, next year in Jerusalem. We break a glass at a Jewish wedding to remember Jerusalem. Synagogues are often built facing Jerusalem. So much about Jerusalem, while Sinai is forgotten. What's the difference between the two? According to tradition, the Messiah will come from Jerusalem. The difference between the two is therefore clear. Both Sinai and Jerusalem have a glorious past. They both have pedigree. They both have what's called in Yiddish, yichus. But in addition to a glorious past, Jerusalem has a future. It has pedigree, but that's all Sinai has. Jerusalem also has destiny. Ralph had a tremendous personal history. You've just heard a smattering of the accomplishments, his accomplishments on behalf of the Jewish people from Jerry and from Joy. While others talked and wrote and planned and then trumpeted what they did, Ralph, in his own modest way and his quiet way, simply did. Others waxed eloquent about the need for Jewish unity, while Ralph traveled the world to make it happen. Jewish leaders talked about Jewish continuity. Ralph insisted that staff create the programs that would make it happen. Some could talk about an activity here, a program there, a person here or there whose lives they impacted for the better. If he wanted to, Ralph could talk about whole communities whose Jews were saved under his watch, sometimes literally, physically, and at other times saved for the Jewish people. But that wasn't what mattered to him. It wasn't the yichus. He was close to Ben-Gurion. He negotiated the JDC's return to the Soviet Union and so much more. But he rarely talked about that. That was past, and therefore finished. Instead, mention a young Goldman fellow volunteering in the Philippines, or a Seder for young people in India, or a preschool for Ethiopian Olim in Sderot, and the words flowed, full of emotion. It wasn't what was, what already happened, that mattered to Ralph. He shrugged those things off. His talk was always of the future, of what will be, of what can be, and of what should be. He wasn't a man of pedigree. He was a man of destiny. The joint to him is not great because it was great. It is great because of its potential, because of what it can be. I want to leave you with one story about Ralph, which, of course, is a JDC story because he and the joint are indistinguishable from one another. In the summer of 1986, Ralph was the CEO. I was beginning my career in Vienna. In the course of a 2-month period, we went from dealing with the needs of 45 young Iranian Jews who had been smuggled out of Iran on their way to freedom to 2,100. They had to wait in Vienna for about a year. There were hundreds of young children, and as refugees, there was no framework for them. The JDC's budget was considerably smaller than that of today, and it was totally overwhelmed by the cost of caring for these people. I wrote to New York describing the problem and asking if they could find some money to pay for English lessons for the children several times a week. I got a note back from Ralph: start a school for them. I tried to be fiscally responsible and responded that we would work up the numbers and send on a plan in a couple of days for his approval. His telegraphed response is etched in my memory. Quote, "The JDC cannot abide a situation in which the education of Jewish children is delayed because of bureaucratic formalities. Start school tomorrow at the latest. JDC will find necessary funds. These children are our future. I will look for confirmation from you that this was done in tomorrow's mail." That was Ralph Goldman. It's wonderful to gather here to share words and to share memories of Ralph. The real tribute will be to go out and to do, through the joint, on behalf of the Jewish people, as he would have wanted. To be inspired by the message of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem, the city he so loved. To do in order to change for the better the destiny of the Jewish people. That would be the real tribute to this giant of a man. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory be a blessing.
I'm Alan Gill, and Ralph Goldman was my hero. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin lihibatel mimena. Pirkei Avot, Ralph loved Jewish text. It is not incumbent upon us to complete the tasks in front of us, but neither are we free to desist from trying to complete that mission. Pirkei Avot. No one I know, no one I believe any of us have known, came closer to finishing than Ralph Goldman, Zichrono Livracha. Na'aseh v'nishma We shall do, and we shall then listen. Asher just said it beautifully. Start the school. We are needed. The joint will be there. Michael Schneider, who's with us today, one of my predecessors and a teacher, said to me, Ralph made me. Ralph made us. He made us better than we are. He lifted us up in a way, in that unique, modest way. Humility is the true path to greatness, as our sages tell us. Ralph personified greatness through that humility. Most of us spend our lives living through history. Ralph shaped history. Think about his life. An early kibbutznik. He had to work the soil. He fought alongside the great ones against the evil scourge of Nazism. Most went back home, here to start their lives, not Ralph. Ralph went to work for the Haganah. Ralph built, along with so many other great ones, the state of Israel. He was at Ben-Gurion's side when the state of Israel was declared as an independent state of the Jewish people. He founded the American Israel Culture Foundation, IEF, the Israel Education Fund, Israel Museum. He had a strong hand in starting. He built the modern JDC in Israel, the whole social R&D that we now take for granted. That was Ralph's genius. He totally reorganized it. And, talk about humility, he wasn't even in charge. He was a deputy director. He reshaped our whole operation in Israel. He built, in the early years of the state, Israel's modern social service system along with his colleagues, et cetera, and then, of course, he was called back to help us to re-enter former communist countries, negotiating deal after deal in his very quiet way. As Ralph said, I prefer the front door. He knew there was a back door, and Ralph knew how to use it. He was a diplomatic genius. The Talmud teaches us that those who carry their fair share of our people's burdens shall indeed be justly rewarded. It is meant for the Olam Haba, we believe, the next life, where Ralph now looks down upon us. But Ralph lives within us. We were inspired by Ralph. Our deeds will be his lasting memory and the commissions that he so deserved, that he is now gaining. Yehi Zichrono Baruch. May his memory forever be a blessing. Penny, will you join me here? And can everybody please rise for a moment of silence in memory of Ralph Isaac Goldman. Thank you.
You've heard what a special person Ralph is. I just have to tell you one short personal experience. 3 years ago, when I became president of JDC, I was in Israel, and Ralph wanted to meet me face to face. It was very complicated. The schedule was very busy, but he was determined to sit down and meet with me. We had had a program. He waited all the way through that program and made arrangements for us to sit at the end of it when everyone had left so that we could meet. And what really struck me was, first of all, I wanted to meet him, but he wanted to meet whoever was the president of this wonderful organization. And where did he have all his notes about what he wanted to talk to me about? On his BlackBerry. He says, oh, it's easier to read it this way. Well, you know, I hope everybody in our lives is as forward-thinking and is so intent on being part of the modern world. You heard it from Joy, you've heard it from everyone who speaks, and we will continue to hear it from him because his legacy will live on forever. We are very fortunate to have had him as part of our history, and I think as part of our future. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank our wonderful, really poignant speakers. Every one of you spoke so beautifully. I do hope that you will go on the JDC website. This is a very beautiful tribute to Ralph in film. We did see a lot of it when we were in Israel, and it was a joy to see him be able to share with us, along with his friend Shimon Peres, like the young one and the old one. And we had a wonderful celebration of life, which is what Ralph would have wanted. But I think it's fitting that we have been able to come together today to do this because he deserves many tributes. And I think his name and his deeds will go down in not only history but in our hearts as someone that we can always hold dear. I really, it's always hard to end something like this because I think we're all taking with us a really good warm feeling, and I think that's what Ralph would want too. So I thank you again, and for all of our guests who came just because it was Ralph and it was a tribute to his memory. And I hope that we have given you a moment to really reflect on this very great man. I just want to say, as we conclude this part of our program, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we really have a board meeting, and Ralph would not want us to miss this board meeting. So just take a couple minutes, maybe just stand up and stretch, board members, and I thank our guests for having attended.